Hi, my name is Joe Minicozzi, and I work with a company called Urban3 based in Asheville. Urban3 is part of a larger company called Public Interest Projects, which is a for-profit real estate development company in downtown Asheville. Incidentally, it was started by Julian Price, who is a native of Greensboro. Julian moved to Asheville and started a for-profit real estate development company that has 75% of its money tied up into traditional real estate development, and 75% of its money goes to seeding businesses. We're a for-profit business that does the sticks and bricks, but also businesses. Urban3 is a spin-off of that focuses on city economics. So we have conventional buildings that we fix, like this is an old hotel building in downtown Asheville that we revitalized into a mixed-use building with apartments and retail on the ground floor. But the key thing about one of our prime focuses in Urban3 is bringing data to cities to understand the economics so that they can better manage that and manage their growth. The cities are essentially large corporations that function with information, and that land is a product. Buildings are a product on that land that return revenue and cost. So understanding that cash flow is critical for the success of a community. So this is one of the buildings that Public Interest Projects revitalized. A streetscape project happened that increased the pedestrian realm, and Public Interest Projects revitalized this project, taking it from about a $300,000 tax value for the total aggregate value before to around $11 million worth of value. So that represents a 3,500% increase in the tax base of the community. The community can now afford 3,500% more stuff off this property. Does that make sense? This is about the value of revitalization. The other thing that we're kind of known for is the analytics of that building compared to, let's say, our Walmart. Our building produces around $634,000 an acre of total property taxes versus the $6,000 an acre of production for the Walmart, or in our case, the retail exceeds the retail of the Walmart per acre. Jobs per acre at 74 per acre versus 6, and even residential. Ours has residential above it, Walmart does not. So we're kind of known for this type of analysis, and this is a shot that a lot of people have seen in magazines and articles. But the key thing, the reason why we show this, is we try to get cities to understand what they are. And to us, cities are essentially finite boundaries of land that have to function. The acres are all that you have, and understanding the cash flow of those acres are no different than a farmer understanding the cash flow of their acres. So we've done this analysis all across the country. We see the same trend over and over again. For every dollar of county taxes produced per acre by a county single-family resident, a city single-family resident is paying about $8 per acre to the county. Walmart's about $7. The mall's about 14, double the big box. As soon as you get to a two-story building, you're stacking value, you're stacking tax productivity. It's $77 an acre, a three-story building at $120, and a six-story building's around $403 an acre. And the growth isn't proportional, it's exponential growth. As you add that density and value in their productivity, you see the return in tax production. So what we're doing here is using land as a finite commodity to gauge efficiency. We're using the acre of land because that's all that you can manage in your community. And we do this with cars. We don't value cars on the miles per tank, do we? If we did, we'd all be driving Ford F-150s at 650 miles per tank. Instead, we do it on gallon of gas because the gasoline is finite and that's the measurement. We all understand that gasoline tanks are different sizes. So when we say miles per gallon, the numbers change. And we have a better understanding of weighing productivity. And we see it here with this BMW Isetta is the number one most efficient vehicle on this page at 70 miles per gallon versus the Prius at number 2 at 50 miles per gallon. Now I'm using this is in essence to be a joke, but it's also a point to drive home on how we understand value and productivity. So we do that with land and understand the productivity per acre. Our goal is to bring data and evidence to the conversation to better understand these things and increase the community's ability to make better decisions. The more data that we have and evidence into the information and discussion, the higher your ability is to make an informed decision. So doing this, we understand this with other forms of data. So if I want to see inside my head, I'll go out and get an x-ray and we have hard tissue information. You can actually see the molars there, or the fillings in the molars. You change the technology, we go to an MRI, we can now see soft tissue inside our heads, the brain matter. You can even do three-dimensional resonance imagings of your brains to see it in 3D. Can we do the same thing with productivity of the city? Can we use technology to see this information? For High Point, we brought our data sets in, as well as using your assessment files. We made a three-dimensional tax model of your entire county. This is Guilford County, and you can see popping up in the center here is Greensboro, but also you can see downtown clearly popping off the map. Off to the lower left here, you can see High Point, and you still see High Point's downtown popping up as well. So we can see the value productivity of both downtowns inside Guilford County. Both of these cities are part of Guilford County. You're a family here of value creation. Zooming into just High Point, just looking at your map, gray is non-taxable. We have a heat map going from low value per acre to high value per acre. When you get into the purples, you're looking at about $12.5 million an acre of value. To put that in perspective, your beige or mid-yellow is somewhere around $600,000 per acre. So you're seeing a high value concentration here in the downtown where you're getting purples and reds. Going up Main Street, it starts to fade, but you're getting some oranges, which are about $1.2 million per acre, to reds, which is about $2 to $5 million per acre. Looking at that in 3D, you can clearly see the productivity of your downtown. It's doing quite well in purples, and then it drops off pretty dramatically, and the rest of your community is pretty even with some spots of growth in different areas. And we see Main Street going out this way with some intermittent red spikes coming out. The Ignite High Point plan is a master plan for revitalization that we've come in on the back end of, and it takes several core areas to look at revitalization from downtown to uptown to the mall area. We're focused on the uptown area, which is a little, about a half mile to 3/4 of a mile along Main Street. This core area is what we focused on in sections 1, 2, and 3. 4 was not part of this project, but we'll come to that at the end. So looking at the main core area, again, here's the project, talks about infill buildings. This is the current situation that you have. This is an aerial rendering of what you currently have, and this is the proposal. So to look at those, this is what you currently have, and we'll just go ahead and focus on these surface parking lots here and here. So the project calls for growing in some additions on existing buildings, and in some cases new buildings that would come into this area. What we were tasked with doing was assessing those properties, figuring out what their future value would be, and hence its full productivity of taxes and tax revenue to the community when those buildings come online. Other areas of the project have more sporadic buildings, more open space, and again, here's a shot of what it looks like, and here's a shot of what it's going to be. So you can see this area here growing, where here it's currently a few buildings. So again, zooming in, you see a lot of surface land area, surface parking, and growth of new buildings growing into this area. So what is the value change of what happens there? How do you make it comparable to understand what its productivity is? And again, taking this model and focusing on this area here, which is the uptown North Main Street area. Zooming into the area, it's very close to your downtown. So we had to pull apart, well, what is it like inside North Carolina? What are its comparables? What's going to happen to the model in the tax productivity? Again, here's the uptown area, here's downtown, and how will this change in the future? Part of finding the answer to that means that you have to find comparable values. So if we have an orange, if we have uptown and what it is, what's like it? Now, it's kind of easy to analyze this if you're asking certain questions. So the questions we asked were, this is a transitional commercial area, so it's a first ring commercial corridor that was mostly auto-based that's now transitioning, according to the plan, to a more pedestrian area. It's got a road diet as part of it, so that narrow the road down, increase the pedestrian ability, increase the access to first ring neighborhoods. So you have a high density of predominantly 1920s architecture that's mixed around that neighborhood. That's your immediate capture of shoppers, of employees, and et cetera. And also, it's a complementary downtown. This won't be a downtown. It'll be a second downtown. And there are classes of those types of real estate that we've seen in other examples, so let's bring those in. Here's where High Point is. Inside Greensboro, you're seeing a similar project in Southside, where it's not downtown, but it's kind of near it. It's not as dense as downtown, but it's a dense mixed-use neighborhood. That's a good comparable. In Asheville, we have a section of town called West Asheville that serves as a complementary downtown, similar characteristics to what you see in your plan. And then in Charlotte, they actually have a road diet project that was intentional, that changed the marketplace in that neighborhood. And again, very similar characteristics that we see in your plan in High Point. So zooming through this, going into Greensboro and seeing the Southside neighborhood, that's this area here south of the tracks. We have Elm Street going through here. So once you cross the tracks on Elm Street, that turns into the Southside neighborhood. You have a piece of commercial corridor, but you also have mostly infill and mixed use in this area. So this is the project area. Here's the original plan. This is incidentally a Dwani-Plater-Zyberk plan. It was highly controversial when it came through Greensboro, and it's slowly been implemented and absorbed into the community. But it's predominantly commercial mixed use along this main street. We have a pedestrian square, and we have infill housing in the back area. So it's gone from this in 2003. You can see the vacant lots here, and then it's slowly filled in over time with some townhouses, mixed use development throughout the neighborhood, higher density apartments on the north part. From a value perspective, it's changed the real estate production in the area. We have commercial mixed use with residential above retail. We have conventional infill housing that have filled the gaps between buildings. And this is how it's resulted. This is the value per acre, again from exempt in green and gray, and we have a heat map of value where their purple is upwards over $26 million an acre. So generally speaking, if you see red here, these two parcels here are somewhere between $6 million and $26 million of value per acre in the red. As you get into the neighborhood, you're seeing mostly greens and beiges. From a valuation standpoint, this is Southside here, this little nub down here, and what its value looked like in 2003 before the project. These blue spikes here are downtown. So it shows you the value that's happening in their downtown, which is typical. And then let's look what happens from what the value was to what it grows to after the project. So this is how it bumps up. You're actually seeing some spikes as high as this popping up in the downtown, which is pretty close to the values you're seeing in your downtown in Greensboro. So the adoption of that plan, the manifestation of that plan manifested value. So let's just kind of click back for a second. Again, before 2003, and then here we are 9 years later. So that's about a 476% change in tax productivity for that little land area of the Southside project. They've cultivated 476% more wealth. The area was worth $13.1 million of taxable basis, and now it's about $76 million of value for that same boundary area. That's the growth that they've seen in their taxable basis, which is the same rate of growth that you're seeing in taxes for that area. Just to kind of weigh that against what's happening in the Greensboro marketplace in general, were we seeing changes? Was that happening everywhere in Greensboro? So we comped a traditional commercial corridor. This is an area where it's always been commerce, and it still is commerce. So this is the Friendly Center corridor. This is what's happened in the Friendly Center. So in Greensboro, you're seeing it does grow between 2004 and 2013. It does grow a little bit. It's growing in a positive, but not nearly the positive growth that you're seeing in Southside. So that improvement in pedestrian space and mixed-use environment has yielded a higher rate of return for Southside than the conventional growth. We've also seen this reflected in land value. This is just looking at the spine. Now the Southside project's down here in this boundary area. This is just the spine of what's happening along Elm Street. That once this neighborhood changed, it changed the desirability of the South Elm real estate. So South Elm, south of the tracks, grew double what was happening, more than 2 times the rate of what was happening on the north side of downtown. So even though downtown was growing, it wasn't doing nearly as well as the south side. So there's a lesson here. The growth of that area in south side actually has a residual impact on adjacent real estate. So here's what it looks like. This is the city of Greensboro's growth of their land appreciation from 2004 to 2012. You see a positive growth. When you get into the the traditional core of downtown. That's growing faster than Greensboro as a whole, but this is the South Elm commercial area growing a heck of a lot faster than downtown and handsomely more than the rest of the city. So there's a lesson in the growth of the real estate adjacent to a project area as well. Asheville, we have examples here in our community that are very relevant to your community. We have downtown Asheville, then there's this other area along Haywood Street, or Haywood Road, sorry, that's called West Asheville. Along Haywood Road, this was a traditional second downtown to main downtown, so it has all of those ingredients that are called for in the Ignite High Point plan, a mix of uses, walkable neighborhoods, etc. So along that spine, we have commercial mixed use, we have apartments, high density housing, mostly 1920s neighborhoods adjacent to the shopping district, from a grocery store all the way on up to a video store. This is how the pedestrian environment functions, a walkable street, 2 lanes of moving traffic, on-street parking, and then all sorts of uses mixed on here, from burger joints to video stores to offices to even some apartments and housing above the video store. So all of those ingredients are there that make it a good and successful comp. It's a secondary downtown, it's a mixed-use environment, it's tied into residential neighborhoods aside. So this is its value of the West Asheville spine compared to downtown. And we also compared it against a conventional corridor, much like we did with the Friendly corridor in Greensboro with our version of Tunnel Road. And what are the value changes happening in these areas? So here's the spine of Haywood Road. Those are the commercial buildings in orange alongside of it. The blue is a pedestrian shed or capture area around that. This is an area of impact and change that's changed because of the access to better restaurants, better commercial needs. What we're seeing overall, Asheville's growth in value has gone up in their land value productivity, or the land appreciation, a little over 50% of growth. But inside this boundary area in West Asheville, we're seeing a much bigger improvement, much larger improvement in real estate at over 75% or 80% of value change. This is my house. I live right in this area. I've seen this change happen. Charlotte underwent a road diet, and they necked down East Boulevard, very similar to the road diet plan for the Main Street proposal for Uptown High Point. So in it, they added on-street parking, uses came in. The boundary area is outside of downtown. It's not in the downtown area. Just to kind of zoom in the core areas of study, in the cool colors and the blues and greens, those are areas of pedestrian access and amenities. In the red areas, those are areas of conventional commercial corridors that are auto-based. So with those, we compared what's happening in the auto market versus the pedestrian market. Here's the East Boulevard road diet in blue. The change in value for all of Charlotte was positive. So all of Charlotte's value is in brown here. But in each of those auto-based areas, we also saw a growth above what was happening in the marketplace. The top producer was the Providence Road area, which is sandwiched in between a series of residential neighborhoods. When you get into the pedestrian-oriented areas, you see a higher value jump, hovering around 50% of growth productivity. Again, the average of Charlotte was somewhere around, let's say, 23% of growth. So more than double the growth rate productivity inside those walkable mixed-use environments. The biggest, most impressive one here is the South Boulevard TOD, which has a train line. Your comp for your road diet is this East Boulevard, which is over 50%. And another good example was the NoDa neighborhood, where that one is achieving phenomenal growth, well off the chart. We didn't bother to put it on that first one. It's kind of obscene, the growth in that pedestrian activity. But there's a lesson here in the growth of the marketplace. So just zooming into East Boulevard, the commercial mixed-use spine, and then the residential areas adjacent to it, what we're seeing in the Charlotte median, again, below 25% market growth. Inside this corridor area, we're seeing a much higher percentage growth, double what we're seeing in the marketplace in general. Again, that's a comparable. So in Charlotte, here's the median of Charlotte, here's the road diet area. double Charlotte. In Asheville, the same thing. Here's Asheville's median, and then here's the West Asheville growth rate over the same period. So in both cases, where we see this walkable mixed-use environment, we see these growth rates increasing in those areas versus a larger market in general. Bringing Greensboro into it, we see the same thing. Downtowns in green, walkable environments in blue, and then commercial conventional strip development is in red. The growth rates exceed in both the walkable environments. Bringing this back into High Point. Now that we've seen those growth rates, how does this reflect itself in the model? Now, just to touch on one thing, these next few slides were produced by Freeman and Kennett, and they represent what's happening in your marketplace in general. This is a study from the Zillow Analysis and the Zillow website in the home value index of what's going on in the marketplace for High Point, Hickory, Chattanooga, Greenville, Roanoke, and Asheville. And what you see that's happening in High Point is a drop from 2005 all the way down to where we are today. And you see what's happened in all of these marketplaces because of the recession. All of them dropped, but many of these markets are rebounding. They're coming back up. Yours is not. So just to kind of zoom in on a few of them, this is you versus Asheville. This is the gap difference in 2005. The difference in value of a single family house in our market versus your market. And just to show what's happened over time, you've essentially, the gap is widened to 2. So that we're actually bouncing up and you're still going down or remaining stagnant. This is not a good thing. It's not just our market. In Greenville, South Carolina, you've gone from that gap of 1 arrow distance to essentially 4 times that gap. Chattanooga, you were actually ahead of Chattanooga in average home value by 2005. During the recession, that flipped. Chattanooga is now pulled away to 4 times, about 4 times the value, which represents a 5 times unit change in value productivity of your marketplaces. Just the average of median home prices across the entire state, the same thing. This was your gap before. Here's your gap now. You're at 2 times the value change in the marketplace. This is not good. When we were looking at your data, we were seeing the same trends. Now that was an independent study by Kennett and Freeman. We're looking at your data. These are your downtowns. This is our downtown, the dirt, just the dirt under the buildings, not counting new buildings that have come in, have grown by 13% of value over that same 2004 to 2012 rate. Charlotte's grown by close to 9%, and you all are depreciating by close to a negative 2%. This is not good. You are trending downward, and that needs to turn around. Just zooming into the market now, coming out of downtown and just looking at the total market change for Greensboro and Guilford County. Guilford County as a whole is growing at about 2% in value. Greensboro is exceeding Guilford County at about 3%. High Point's actually going the opposite direction. The city itself is trending at a minus 3% in value per year over these years, and it's even more dramatic when you get into just the uptown core area. You're close to about a negative 10% of value drop in the dirt. Now that's good and bad. It's becoming more affordable, but it's also not the trend that you want to see if you're trying to manage a city. So again, just to focus on those numbers, this is close to a 10% drop in the uptown area. Now to turn that around, your community has adopted this Ignite High Point plan, which is a master plan for turning around the value, with the understanding of filling in new buildings would change the value. So looking at that, our analysis focused on the infill buildings, what opportunities there are, and all of this data will be available in your city offices, but there's essentially a market value below $25 a square foot for the properties. They're highly underutilized, but there's a lot of opportunities within the market area that aren't being captured. So here's the uptown Main Street spine. The hospital is very close at about 2,000 workers right nearby, easy walking distance, as well as High Point University with 1,100 students or workers close by. That's an easy market capture. You also have, within the employment, you also have residents, at over 4,700 residents with discretionary income that can be used in this area. This could serve as their neighborhood commercial spine, much in the way that the Road Diet in Charlotte and Haywood Road in West Asheville function. The incomes of the different neighborhoods were pulled by the census information and census tracts. So within the census tracts, you start to see high amounts of revenue in parts of the neighborhood, but even in other neighborhoods where there's not the same discretionary spending, it's still significant. So in beige here, we're looking at $7,000 to $17,000 of additional discretionary spending that can be captured in this market area rather than leaked out to other areas. What that means from a numbers standpoint, that's $600,000 of productivity that could be captured here on the east side. You get into the west side, you're looking at over $10 million annually of discretionary spending and upwards of $29 million by the hospital. So in addition to the workers, you have residents with money that can be spent here as well. Now, in every market, there's market demographics of housing choices. So you have single family detached, which represents a large amount of your community's market demand. And that demand is being met. What isn't being met are the apartments, condominiums, attached housing and townhouses, and other types of housing, high density walkable stuff that the master plan calls for filling in. That's about 24% of your marketplace, which is a significant number of units. So when you break the units down, it's about 26,000 units that could be absorbed. You see here in green in your market. Greensboro's got about 66,000. Your whole market area is about 177,000 units of housing that could be built. If they built, these are your market categories. So just shooting for a high point is great, but you can also capture a significant pile of those housing units up in your total MSA or metropolitan statistical area. We worked collaboratively with the Guilford County Assessor's Office and basically tried to forecast what the future assessed value would be per square foot of all of the infill buildings that were called for in the plan. The Guilford County Assessor's Office came up with these two values for retail per square foot and residential per square foot of future value of those properties within the study area. By looking at the comps of other communities, we saw a little bit of a bump above those values. So this is the average of what we were seeing in retail, in green, in residential, in orange. And we kind of shot for using numbers that would be somewhat the average of the two. So our retail numbers were about $64 a square foot of future value, and our residential was coming in at about $95 of future value. Not as high as what we saw in the other marketplaces, but not as low as the values were projected either. So taking those buildings that would be new, these infill buildings that would happen along the street, they would all come in phases, so we phased them in different colors to say when they would be kicking in the future time. This all doesn't happen at once. So this is your downtown, here's uptown, and this is its relationship today. This is the existing condition of value on uptown versus downtown. Just isolating the uptown area, the existing, and then saying if you add buildings in, the first step would probably be coming online by 2017. You see a little bump, so let's go back and forward, there you go. Add in a few more buildings by 2020, and then 2023, and then you see a higher spike coming in because you're getting higher density, higher value. It's also picking up value from the previous projects that are there. And then this is your 2026 future build out. So you see that by 2026, uptown is now catching up to a median value inside downtown. You're seeing reds and oranges here where you hadn't before. Now what that represents from a gap change of value, or what's the total productivity of taxes over that time period, this is what's going on in your marketplace. So in addition to downtown's value changes, this is what's happening in your total marketplace. Your existing condition of value in the uptown area is dropping significantly. You see what happened and how your communities had to deal with that drop is they actually did 2 tax increases here, increased the millage rate to stop some of the bleeding, but it still continued on this bleeding course. Your plan is to get buildings in a pedestrian manner and hopefully cultivate new wealth. We just assumed that the future doesn't change, that you stay at today's value. There's no more depreciation. It doesn't depreciate. And then you start adding new buildings. These kinks that happen are all new phases of new buildings coming online, but that total capture inside this triangle area here of future value to your community or future tax production is about $1.2 million. That's just on the street. Now, as we saw in the other marketplaces, there's an impact in the residential immediately adjacent to it. So that's the street. This is the neighboring project area. So you're going to see about a $1.1 million growth inside the boundary of that 5-minute walk adjacent to it. When you add the two of them together, you're looking at about $2.3 million of total productivity once the road diet happens and the projects are built. Now that's just phase one, or the first leg. There's a leg north of Lexington that has a significantly higher density of houses, and that's this line here. That was our estimate. Now we didn't add this in for this project because we're focusing first on this first knuckle of the road diet, but that's something you could look forward to. Now that's predicated on this road diet project happening. You can't just get a pedestrian environment without the pedestrian realm. So just to recap, High Point's worth $6.8 billion. That's an incredibly valuable portfolio. It's a corporation that has to function financially. These other corporations have to do the same. High Point's worth more than all three of these teams combined. Or another way of looking at it, High Point's worth 6 Panthers, 2 Bobcats, and a Hurricanes. And think about that. Think about how these businesses operate. They're constantly cultivating data and making value choices based on productivity. They understand the costs and revenues of all parts of their corporations, and the Panthers know what Cam Newton's towel bill is, for crying out loud. Your community needs to have that same focus and intensity about productivity that one would expect in a professional sports team. Our role is to manage information and bring information to you to help you make better decisions and cut through what the data shows and what's going on in your community. This is your three-dimensional tax model. What your plan calls for is expanding that revenue and wealth that you're already seeing in your downtown and expanding it northward into the uptown area, cultivating your wealth. And what we're trying to do here is bring the math forward and do the math so that you can understand your community, make better decisions, see what's going on financially, and cultivate your revenue and wealth into the future. Thank you.